Hello, thank you. I feel like I should do stand up. It's the end of podcast movement. Now, I have a very serious thing to talk about today. We're talking about why bold creative wins. We've spent the last few years talking about the attention economy. We talk about more content, more platforms, more spend, and more output. But as we close out our time here at South by Southwest, I want to offer us all a reframing because the conditions have changed. We are no longer in an attention economy. We are in an attention scarcity economy. Attention isn't abundant anymore. I don't think I need to tell you that. It's guarded and selective. And that shift quietly changes how risk works, whether we update our models or not. The industry, we love to blame oversaturation, but I don't think that's the real problem. The real problem is what happens after attention becomes scarce. When attention becomes scarce, systems get conservative. That is not a moral failure. It's a rational response. We want to follow the money. So what happens? Our budgets tighten, stakes feel higher. And let's be honest, nobody here wants to be the person who approved the thing that failed. So decisions start optimizing for safety. We choose things like brand safe language and familiar formats. We use proven structures. In short, we produce content that won't upset anyone. And on paper, that all makes sense, but safety has real side effects, and sometimes your spreadsheets are lying to you. Because when fear-based optimization becomes the dominant strategy, creativity is usually the first thing that becomes constrained. We soften our language, we sand down all of our edges, and before you know it, everything starts drifting toward the same beige middle. Now, beige content isn't bad because it's offensive. Quite the opposite. It's bad because it is interchangeable. Safe creative leads to sameness, and sameness is your fast track ticket to invisibility. And invisibility is the most expensive outcome that a buyer can fund. As a buyer, you can spend money, you can hit all your benchmarks, and you can technically be present in the market, and you can still not move anyone. Metrics will tell you that a show exists. They cannot tell you whether that show mattered. So when I talk about bold creative, I want to be very precise because this is where I feel like the term often gets misheard. Bold does not mean controversial. It does not mean being edgy just for the sake of being edgy. It does not mean intentionally polarizing. Bold is about being specific, and specificity is not an aesthetic preference. It is a strategic filter, and filtering is where the power actually lives. Podcasting exists because people like us were allowed to speak without permission. That freedom is not just cultural, it's an economic freedom. When creative expression gets diluted to feel safer, we don't just lose our voices. We lose the very mechanism that creates trust, loyalty, and long-term value. This medium works because people can recognize a point of view, and they get to decide whether they're going to lean in or walk away. That decision-making is the system doing its job. I want to ground my short time here on the stage with you with a real-life client story. In my studio as a producer, I work with a lot of creators who don't have massive audiences. I am known as a champion of underdogs. One of my underdogs is a longtime client who has recently made a big pivot in her business, and part of that pivot involves making content for a YouTube channel. Before I got on the plane to Austin, I double-checked to make sure I got it right. She is, I'm proud to say, up to a whopping 22 subscribers. Give it up for Beth. Not 22,000, just 22, and I am one of them. I don't know if I count. If you evaluated that show purely by scale, especially here in a room at South by Southwest, we'd all write that show off. But here's what I find very interesting about a show like Beth with her 22 subscribers. Those 22 people trust her implicitly. They listen all the way through. How many people, million in the back here, can say that their listeners listen all the way through every single episode? They reply to her episodes. They share her quietly with their networks. And most importantly, they act on what she says. I look at her tiny audience and I do not see a reach problem. I see a conviction engine. And over time, that conviction compounds, not because the show tries to appeal to more people, but because it refuses to dilute itself for a scale that it has not yet earned. This is not a creator feel-good story. This is a story about a data point that shows you what trust density is. Specificity filters audiences, and filtering concentrates trust, and trust changes behavior. This is why I now believe that conviction is now a better predictor of action than reach, because reach will tell you how many people saw something, but conviction tells you how many people were moved by the thing that they saw. In an attention-scarce environment, movement matters more than impressions. And this matters even more now because of what's happening across the market. We heard lots of stories of this weekend. AI and automation are flooding the system with content that is fast, cheap, and beige. Production is no longer scarce. Distribution is no longer scarce, which means that the risk has shifted. Interchangeability is now the most expensive failure mode in the market, because if content can be replaced without consequence, it holds no power. Beige content is easy to replace, but unmistakable voices are not, which brings us back to buyers. If the conditions have changed, then our evaluation criteria have to change too. For a long time, the dominant evaluation lens has sounded like this. Is the audience big? Is the tone broadly appealing? Is the content brand safe? A more useful lens now sounds like this. Who is this unmistakably for? What does it refuse to be? And what worldview would be diluted if we tried to scale it too fast? Because content that offends no one often moves no one. And content optimized for universal approval usually ends up memorable to no one. So when we talk about why bold creative wins, this is what we're really saying. Bold creative can't be automated into irrelevance. It compounds instead of evaporates. It creates loyalty, not just visibility. The future belongs to unmistakable voices, not interchangeable formats. And sometimes, the most powerful ones are the smallest. So the real question I'm leaving you with here at Podcast Movement Evolutions 2026 is this. What are we all still measuring that keeps us blind to our bold creatives? Thank you.